Hey y'all, Nick Pomeroy here, PR Equipment, Kearns, Texas. Hey, today we're doing another in the cab video. I'm actually out here in the side lot, sitting in the cab of a Massey Ferguson 5711D. You've probably seen a couple videos where I'm sitting in a 5711D. It's kind of partial to this tractor. There's a lot of things I really like about it. I just really think it's just an awesome tractor for what it is, and it fits our area pretty well for those guys looking for a little bit more. But anyway, I'm in the cab here, and I kind of wanted to lead off into a video series we're going to be doing, or this is kind of like, I don't know, the background that's behind a couple videos coming up. We want to do kind of a dive into emission systems, the dreaded emission systems. And of course, I'm sure you've heard people talk about emission systems, and they're probably cussing them or mad at the government or whatever the case. I mean, I've been around the business a long time. I worked for Massey Ferguson for a lot of years. I spent a lot of time when these systems first came out was when I was actually working on the technical side with Massey Ferguson. So I spent a lot of time in training and a lot of time in training technicians and troubleshooting these systems over the phone. So I've seen it from a lot of different angles, from the customer side, you know, from the dealer side and from the manufacturer side. I know quite a bit about these systems. It was obviously a hot topic at the time. One of the unique things Massey Ferguson did, though, was they jumped into the DEF systems pretty early on, but when there was some other manufacturers who were still trying to fight having to use DEF, and Massey and AGCO in general, even on some of the Challenger products and things like that, they went ahead and jumped off into it because it was, I mean, as we can see now, it was inevitable, and so might as well jump off into it and let's just get it figured out. So I like to think AGCO's a little bit ahead of the game when it comes to the SCR systems, especially. But even with the regen and things, there's been a lot of changes coming over the years. But typically, if you talk to folks, they're going to talk about emission systems, and they're going to be talking about how oh, they're unreliable, and oh, you don't want the emissions, and oh, I want an old school tractor that doesn't have all this stuff on there. And I get it, right? Like, I understand all of those concepts, and I understand what people are saying. I can tell you that I spent some time when I was troubleshooting tractors. We went through a couple periods of times and a couple, I will call them generations of systems where, yeah, they weren't super reliable, and it really gave the whole emissions topic a really negative overtone. And it's still, I understand the point where it's like, yeah, it'd be nice if we didn't have to have it. But a couple things I wanted to dive into, and one, I brought a thing here to show y'all what emissions did for us. And I'm not the kind of guy who's rah environmental, but I do believe, and this might be controversial for some, that we should take care of the earth, right? I've got young kids, and I'd sure like them for us to have something around for them, and I believe that we were given this, that the earth is a gift and we need to take care of it. But I'm also not way overboard, you know, trees and save them, you know. There's a balance here, in my opinion, and I'm kind of middle of the road. But I think it's kind of cool when we look at this chart. This is tier 1 emissions, and the different colors represent different horsepower ranges. And if you follow this down, you can see how huge this was at tier 1. This, if you can see it, is where tier 4 final is. And if you ask me, that's pretty dadgum impressive. How much we've reduced emissions over 20 years. In fact, the majority of this, I think, happened within, you know, the last 10 years. This is pretty impressive. And of course, when we talk about emissions, there's two primary things we're looking at. We're looking at particulate matter, and we're looking at Nox gases. And there's a third one kind of coming in, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not an expert on what's coming. I do know quite a bit about what we have today. And so right now we're really interested in two primary things, which is particulate matter, which is the black smoke and the soot, and Nox gases, which is kind of the result of us cleaning up the soot. So early on in the emissions, we were rocking along, and the government said, we want to get rid of this black smoke, we want to get rid of this particulate matter, this carbon or whatnot, this unburnt fuel primarily. We want to get rid of that. Well, that's no problem. What come at that point was common rail injection. And common rail injection allowed us to do some things with the injection pressures, as well as the injection pattern or the injection timing, that it allowed us to get rid of that by more or less increasing combustion temperatures, but basically a leaner and cleaner burn. Well, what happened when we did that was Nox gases were formed. So when we got it too hot in the combustion chamber, when we started to increase those temperatures, we began to fuse nitrogen to oxygen and make Nox gases. And so well, now we've created a whole other issue. And Nox gases aren't great, right? They're not great for the environment, and so we'd like to get rid of those. And so when we did that, so then we're like, okay, so there's a couple different ways we can do that. We can either change how we're injecting, change the fuel, ratio, go back to putting out a little soot, or we can begin to tackle this Nox gas issue. But they're like, okay, we'll just get rid of it. We'll have to go back to a little richer burn. Well, the government, of course, wasn't okay with that. We want to tackle both these issues in tandem. So now we got the Nox gases we're trying to deal with. That's really where the SCR systems were born, but it's also kind of the DPF too. So early on, there was, when the emissions weren't quite to this level, we had some options about how to tackle these things. One was, let's go back to running it cooler, not produce Nox gases, but deal with the particulate matter after the fact. And so that's where the DPF systems were born. And that's really, a lot of people, when you hear that, but you don't maybe know that that's regen, right? So typically speaking, what a DPF filter does, and there's some other versions of this, but for all intents and purposes, and the ones you've heard about the most, it's a DPF filter that captures the particulate matter, the soot coming out of the engine. And when we do that, we begin to build up too much of that, and somehow we got to get rid of it, which is where we go into the regen system, or basically burning it off. There's a number of different ways to try to burn that off. There's active and there's passive systems, or systems you don't ever touch. They're doing it themselves. There's active systems. There's a number of different strategies for how to burn that off, whether we're changing timing and trying to get more heat out of the engine to burn it off, or whether we're trying to send some burn it off from the engine, or burn it off after the fact with actually injecting fuel into the exhaust. And so there's a number of different factors there that come into play when we talk about the regen system, which is super common in the different horsepower ranges, but even some larger tractors today. But early on, certain manufacturers said, we're going to go this way. And certain manufacturers, and primarily AGCO, said, no, we know we're going to have to go to DEF at some point. Let's go ahead and get off in those weeds now. And so early generations of AGCO tractors could actually go either way. You could buy it with a regen system, or you could buy it with a DEF system. The Tier 3, what we call LRTs, had the ability to go either way. And pretty soon they realized that really SCR was the best option in Tier 4I interim with all SCR systems. But different horsepower ranges have different requirements. And you can see that represented by the different colors, but basically, more or less how it breaks down is under 25 horsepower, and this is for our tractors. The larger tractors are a little bit different, and I could go over that, but I really want to talk to our customers. And so under 25 horsepower, they basically don't have anything as far as restrictions go. And the reason why is because if they had to make those meet emissions, it would be cost prohibitive and it wouldn't make any sense. There's a lot of factors. Also, just the bulk of how much stuff would have to be bolted to the engine. It's just not really feasible. But basically 25 to 75 horsepower, it began to look at some of these things a little harder, and most of those systems in that range, and there are a few that still are somehow avoiding some of that. In fact, we sell a couple of them, but there's some tractors that are still avoiding it. I think it has to do more with the technicality kind of stuff than anything. I don't think they're meeting emissions, but 25 to 75 horsepower, we're going to get off in the weeds, and we're going to talk about, we're really worried about particulate matter because that's the most cost-effective way to meet those emission standards. So if you see compact tractors out there, the majority of them have some sort of regen system, and there's a few different strategies for doing that, but it's come a long ways and got much more reliable than the first generation, which was a struggle. But they've come a long ways, and they've even made improvements to those older systems to kind of get those up to snuff. So that's DPF. And so typically that's under 75 horsepower. And once you get above 75 horsepower, we're now really looking at Nox gases real hard, and we're also looking at particulate matter. So we've got to start looking at other systems. Now, there are tractors out there utilizing both systems, regen and def. To this day, there are still those systems out there. For us, we're pretty fortunate. We are just running SCR or def systems, and we're able to stay really, really clean, and it's impressive how efficient these systems are, and what is actually coming out the tailpipe is quite clean. So, like I say, there's just a few different directions that this thing went. And I want to dive into those in a couple other videos. We've actually already shot the DEF system, the SCR system videos, so that'll be released here soon. And then also we're going to be working on a DPF video talking about diesel particulate filter. But just know, first off, where we've come, I think it's pretty impressive. And I don't think trying to do better for the environment is a bad thing. I do disagree a lot with how it was rolled out and some of the factors that come along with it, and are we really making gains and things like that. But I think big picture, we need to step back and just look at, hey, you know, there's some positive things with what we've done with these diesel engines. Second off, they're much, much more reliable than they've ever been. We've sold a lot of these tractors, a lot of DEF systems and things like that, and we've really, it's made some big strides. And so there's a lot of exciting things there. And don't forget, Massey Ferguson backs up all of their emission systems with a 5-year, 3,000-hour emissions warranty. That's going to cover everything that is helping that engine meet emissions. And so Massey's standing behind it, Yagco's standing behind it and saying, hey, we believe in this system and it's going to work. And I know there's a whole nother topic of delete it, and, you know, don't delete it and things like that, and once it's out of warranty. I'm not really going to jump off into that, and I've been around a little of that. I'm going to kind of stay out of that and let other folks handle that one. But I want y'all to understand a little bit more what it is that we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and why there are pluses and minuses to everything. And so be on the lookout for our other videos. As always, hey, thanks for tuning in. If y'all want to see us tackle any other issues like this, just shoot us a message there in the comment section. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You know, if there's something you'd like to know about, we'll do our best to try to oblige. And as always, guys, come check us out at PR Equipment. You know, you can call or text us 903-270-0877. You can also check us out on our website, prequipmentsales.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook. We're always trying to not only, you know, obviously we want to sell you equipment and we want to service your equipment and sell you parts, but we also like to do this educational piece where we try to help customers understand just a little bit more what's going on with this equipment and how it can help their operation. Thanks, y'all.